Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk from Jerusalem, Israel. Rabbi Chaim Richman here, together with Yitzchak Reuven. Today, the 20th day of the month of healing, the month of ER 5777. It's the 16th day of May 2017. It's the 35th day of the Omer. That's 5 complete weeks. And this Shabbat, we conclude the roller coaster ride of the book of Leviticus with the double Torah portions of Behar and Bechukotei. And I might point out, this Shabbat is also Shabbat Mevorchim, the Sabbath of the blessing of the new moon, because next Friday is Rosh Chodesh Sivan, the month of twins. The month of the... Yes, Yitzchak is looking at me. Yes, Gemini.
Is doing
it's a
something
month
with
of
his
twins.
eyebrows.
It's the 2 tablets. It's Moshe and Aaron. It's Israel and Hashem. It's a theme of twins. That's why it's Gemini. It's Sivan, the month of the giving of the Torah. And also, I must remind you that Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day, the day of the liberation and unification of the holy city, eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem, is coming up next week on Wednesday, May 24th, coinciding with the 28th day of the month of ER. And first and foremost, to this week's double Torah portion, the conclusion of the book of Leviticus, we begin with Parshat Behar. Behar, meaning in the mountain, begins with the concept of the Shemitah, the sabbatical year, and talks about the commandment that was given at Mount Sinai, together with all the other commandments, for having the land observe a Sabbath rest for Hashem, that we can sow a field for 6 years and prune the vineyard, and gather the crop, but at the 7th year should be a complete rest for the land, a Sabbath for Hashem. And I think that this beautiful concept, which wonderfully in the modern state of Israel is becoming more and more part of the fabric of society, of the social context of the whole growth in Torah observance and identification with these things. The observance of Shemitah in the land of Israel, it presents challenges. It is a very exhilarating and amazing experience to see how the sabbatical year is observed in the month of Israel. And I think it's deeper than that. I think it also shows us the tremendous connection that we have with the land of Israel, the living, breathing land of Israel. You know, we have a window into God's love of the number 7, as it were, his concept of 7, because just as we are observing now the 7 complete weeks of the counting of the Omer between Pesach and Shavuot, so the Torah here in this week's portion, beginning in chapter 25, describes to us the sabbatical year, and then you shall count for yourself 7 cycles of sabbatical years, 7 years, 7 times. The years of the 7 cycles of sabbatical years shall be for you 49 years. You shall sound a broken blast on the shofar in the 7th month, on the 10th of the month, on the Day of Atonement. You shall sound the shofar throughout your land, shall sanctify the 50th year, and proclaim freedom throughout the land for all its inhabitants. It shall be the jubilee year for you. You shall return each man to his ancestral heritage, and you shall return each man to his family. So the jubilee year, which is a super sabbatical year, is a very holy concept in the Torah. This year we are counting as the Jubilee of Jerusalem. It's not the Jubilee in the biblical sense of 7 times 7, but it is the 50th year of the unification of Jerusalem, and we're all pretty excited about that, to tell you the truth. And it's just an amazing time to be alive and to be an Israeli citizen, to be a Jew, focused with that beating, pulsating heart of Jerusalem in our collective body. Jerusalem that is the fuel of our reality and of our dream. that keeps us moving forward towards the fulfillment of every prophecy. Jerusalem that is synonymous with everything that's good and right about this world. Jerusalem that was never a capital. Are you listening? United States of America. Jerusalem that was never a capital for any other people in the world. Never an Arab capital, never a capital for anybody other than the Jewish people. Jerusalem that's mentioned 700 times, or Yitzchak knows exactly how many times.
627.
In the Holy Torah. And how many times in the Quran?
Zero.
That's a big zero. And today, the new United States ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, presented his credentials to President Reuven. President Reuven turned to him and said, "It's time for America to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital." What, you may be thinking? What? America does not recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital? No, they don't. Didn't you know that? That's why, for example, Americans here in Israel have been living with the irony that when we have a child born in Jerusalem and we go to the United States consulate to get American passport and paperwork for the child, the passport would say that the child was born, and the birth certificate would say the child was born in Jerusalem but not mention Israel. It's like the only city in the world, according to America, that isn't associated with a country. And to make matters even worse, why? Just today, again, we read that the President Trump's team arrived in Israel some days ago with the 500 billion limousines and manpower and all sorts of things, and they're coordinating with their Israeli counterparts. Security, 10,000 Israeli policemen. Actually, that's not an exaggeration. 10,000 Israeli policemen are going to be protecting President Trump on his visit. And so they were talking about, in fact, it was reported here in the news that President Trump, blessedly, if this is true, a very, very nice thing, he's going to be the first sitting United States president who's actually going to visit the Kotel, the Western Wall, because other United States presidents visited before they became president and afterwards, but not while they were president, because I guess that might intimate that they actually recognize the significance of the Kotel for the Jewish people. Anyway, so it was reported here in one of the news carriers that President Trump is planning on visiting the Kotel. So apparently, in the coordinating teams of the Israeli security and the American security, coordinating the itinerary, the Israeli side said, "May we please ask that Prime Minister Netanyahu should accompany President Trump to the Kotel, to the Western Wall." And what we read today here in Israel is that the Americans responded rudely and very, very not nicely. They responded, "No, mind your own business. First of all, this is his private trip. Second of all, the Kotel is not yours. It's not even your territory. It's the West Bank." Can you imagine? That's what they said. To which Israel apparently responded with great anger. And then the White House issued a clarification number, I don't know what, for this day exactly, that statement that was made by some person, some executive in that entourage, or maybe it even came from America, I don't know, but that statement was unauthorized. That statement about how the Kotel is not ours and it's not even our territory because it's the West Bank. The White House said that statement was unauthorized and it doesn't reflect the position of America, and it certainly doesn't reflect the position of the president. Well, Yitzchak and I ask, if it doesn't reflect that, then how come the fact is America does not recognize Israel, Israel's capital, as being Jerusalem, to the extent that the president of Israel, Reuven, actually turned to David Friedman today and said, "It's high time that you did." And of course, this leads us to the imbroglio. What is that word?
Imbroglio?
It leads us to the saga of the embassy.
I just want to clarify. When we say that the United States doesn't recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, we're talking about not United Jerusalem, not East Jerusalem, or not even West Jerusalem. Even West Jerusalem, which is a concept referring to Jerusalem as a formerly divided city between Israel and Jordan. Jordan illegally occupied Jerusalem between 1948 and 1967. Even West Jerusalem, where Israel's Knesset is and government offices are, is not recognized as capital of Israel by the United States. And currently, I think there are no embassies in Jerusalem, foreign embassies in Jerusalem. I just want to add that, Rabbi.
Anyway, the thing is, President Trump, he's been talking about making a deal. This is like the mother of all deals. He's like a deal maker, you know, that's his whole thing. He makes deals. He's a businessman. And he's been talking about how he's going to make the peace deal for Israel and the Palestinians. And should that be so hard? He says, like, you know, he said he met with Abbas, by the way, who's been educating Palestinian children towards peace. Mm-hmm. He said, see, it's not so hard. So he is going to be making a deal. This is his program now. And the Palestinians apparently are, the news here reported that the Palestinians have renewed hopes. Well, I got to tell you, if the Palestinians have renewed hopes, I'm pretty worried. So I don't know what his plan is, nor do I care. Because here in Parshat Behar, I read in chapter 25 and verse 18, "You shall perform my decrees and observe my ordinances and perform them. Then you shall dwell securely on the land." There's a peace plan right there. The land will give its fruit, and you will eat your fill. You will dwell securely upon it. So again, this whole metaphor of the sabbatical year is one way of deepening our understanding in what our connection to the land of Israel really is all about. Thing is, you know, yesterday here in Israel, May 15th, that actually is what it is. May 15th is observed by the Palestinians as Nakba Day. That means the catastrophe. And they're referring to the catastrophe of the establishment of the State of Israel. And earlier this year, the Palestinians demanded that Great Britain apologize for the Balfour Declaration. And actually, Great Britain refused to apologize. They said they were very proud of their establishment of the State of Israel. Anyway, so what's the Nakba, this catastrophe, all about? The catastrophe is that the Arabs lost, and that they haven't destroyed Israel. The Nakba is a whole concept of this fake news, this fake reality, this fake history invented by this fake people, the Palestinians, about how Israel destroyed their homes and exiled their people and turned them into refugees. And the short history of what happened is that Israel was attacked the day after it was declared by 5 Arab armies. They lost. The Arab committees implored and demanded their people to flee so that they would make short shrift out of Israel and their people would come back quickly and take any homes they want. That didn't happen, and that's the catastrophe. Yesterday I saw a picture on Facebook that someone posted of an Arab woman, that is a Palestinian woman, of course, at a Nakba Day protest. It was a really amazing picture because she was protesting how the Israelis took her home away from her, and she was holding up a key that she had on a string around her neck, and she was showing, this is the key to my home. And the key was a Rav Berech key, which is a very sophisticated lock company here in Israel, actually a tremendous patents of international technology that was invented here in Israel. She's holding up this key to a lock, which she says is the home that was destroyed by Israel. And the company was not invented for like 30 years after that event happened. So that's what you call fake history. But anyway, you know what? Speaking of fake news, I gotta tell you, we hear everywhere this expression being used, fake news. I don't know, some people are saying fake news, and they mean that everything that's said about this person is fake news. And then that person says, no, you're fake news, and they're all fake. I don't know. The thing is, the Torah isn't fake, and everything that we're learning in these Torah portions is not fake. And what can you do about all this fake news? It's pretty amazing. You know, there's a Mishnah towards the end of Tractate Sotah that describes the way things are going to be right before Mashiach comes. And then there's a lot of statements that the sages of the Talmud make in that particular section. And it's around page 48 or 49 in Tractate Sotah that talks about the state of things that are going to be prevalent in the generation that Mashiach comes in. How people are going to be very arrogant, and people are going to be immodest, and people are not going to be respecting each other, and children are not going to respect youth, are not going to respect their elders, and overpricing, and all sorts of things are described. It's a very bleak picture, prophetic, and there's a very famous statement that's made there, and the statement is widely understood. The statement says, describing about these days, Chutzpah yasge, which is generally translated as chutzpah, which I don't have to translate for you, I assume. Chutzpah means like brazen, nerve, kind of brazen. Like nerve, like gall, like to be like a bald face, like kind of gall, right? Yeah. So the Talmud says, chutzpah will be greatly increased. In other words, it's going to be a generation of people that are just like extremely brazen and arrogant and everything like that. But actually, one of the commentators point out that is not the pshat. That is not actually how to learn this section, the simple interpretation. That's not what it means. Because the word yaske, Yud Samach Gimel Aleph over there, it doesn't mean increased, like mitrabeh, like ribui. It doesn't mean there'll be more. It actually means it will be uplifted. It will be like elevated.
Embraced.
So that the actual interpretation, correct interpretation, according to this commentary, of those words is, and he says it in so many words, it says, Chutzpah will be king. And then he says that whereas heretofore leaders were empowered because of leadership, now whoever has the most chutzpah is going to be the leader. Chutzpah yaske, simple interpretation. The chutzpah is going to be uplifted, and that's going to be the qualifications for being a leader, is going to be whoever has the most chutzpah. And who was it that said, steal a little and they'll throw you in jail, steal a lot and they'll make you king? And what I was thinking about this thing, specifically regarding a number of things. First of all, President Trump met recently with President Abbas of the Palestinian Authority in Washington. And President Abbas stood there and told him how much the Palestinian people want peace and how they are educating their children to peace. And Netanyahu immediately lashed out and he said that he's lying. And Trump is too naive and too unsophisticatedly uninformed of the facts to have been aware of the fact that the Palestinians routinely name schools and streets after mass murderers of our children, that their textbooks are filled with hatred and incitement, that their children's television programs, their Sesame Street and cartoon-style programs laud and glorify martyring oneself, dying for killing Jews, and they call that educating for peace. Okay, chutzpah yaske. Also, a Palestinian who was convicted of killing 6 Israelis in the 1980 terror attack was elected mayor of Hebron. Okay, so this is Taser Abu Sinena, of the famed Abu Sinena clan of Hebron, was selected by the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah to head the party's list in Hebron. And this man, who was one of 4 Palestinian terrorists who on May 2nd, 1980, attacked a group of Israelis and Jews in a Hebron alley, firing and hurling grenades at them. The attack killed, are you listening, America? The attack killed U.S. citizens Tzvi Glatt and Eli Hazev, Canadian Shmuel Marmelstein, and Israelis Hanan Krautalmer and Gershon Klein and Yaakov Zimmerman, and another 20 people were injured in the attack. So he was elected mayor of Hebron. Chutzpah. I'll tell you another thing that I find absolutely unbelievable, and that is that last week a Jordanian citizen who was in Israel with a tourist visa attacked a policeman in the Old City, stabbing him repeatedly. There was footage of it on Facebook. The policeman was bleeding to death, and the policeman killed this horrible monster that came over to him and started stabbing him. And Jordan said that Israel has to be punished for this heinous crime of killing this Israeli, of killing this Jordanian, that Israel has to be held responsible for this horrible crime of killing this Jordanian. And then Israel protested such an outrageous statement. And Jordan said something about the fact that, you know, you have to understand, he might have killed that policeman, but that was on occupied territory. So now, after some diplomatic exchanges, Jordan's foreign minister, he responded to Netanyahu's criticism. And he says, listen, Jordan, he says, listen, our position against terrorism is clear to everyone. He says, Jordan is and was a voice of reason and peace. Our positions against violence and terrorism are clear to everyone. Understand? So, chutzpah, this is what happens when whoever is in power because they have the most brazen arrogance and gall, and they will tell the biggest lie. So Jordan said that killing the terrorists was a terrible crime. And so it goes, and so when we hear this stuff and it keeps rolling in over us, I think it becomes easier to understand what our Torah portion is talking about. And there's the music. Stay with us. I missed my timing. We'll be right back. I got excited. Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven with my friend and yours, Rabbi Chaim Richman, here in Jerusalem. Today is the 19th day of ER 5777, 16th day of May 2017. This coming Shabbat, the double parasha, the double Torah reading of Behar and Bechukotei, which will complete the book of Leviticus, Vayikra, which I've been thoroughly enjoying, Rabbi. You know that you and I love the book of Vayikra. It is the heart. And of course, the book of Vayikra is preparing us now to enter into the land, because that's the next step in the program, which is why I believe we're learning here in Parshat Behar about the Shemitah, sabbatical years of the land of Israel, and why we get a final warning in Bechukotai, the admonitions if we should stray, God forbid, from fulfilling God's commandments, and what ramifications that would have. And if I may continue, I just want to update people. Today is the 35th day of the counting of the Omer. We've been talking a lot about Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day, the 50th anniversary of the liberation and unification of Jerusalem back in 1967. I think it was actually in the Loazi calendar, I think it was the 7th of June, 1967, that Israeli soldiers first set foot on the Temple Mount. And the day, Yom Yerushalayim, will be next Wednesday, although celebrations are going to be all week long. And next Wednesday is the 28th day of Iyar. It's the 43rd day of the counting of the Omer. And the Kabbalistic configuration of that day is Malachut B'Yesod, which I guess we could translate as kingship or sovereignty
of the foundation.
Of the foundation, which just seems so magnificently appropriate.
Right, because the Malachut is always about bringing the thing down into this world and making it happen, making it real, making Hashem king through it, basically.
And also, Rabbi, the actual, on the 7th of June, 1967 was also a Wednesday, correct?
Yes, it was. That reminds me of the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in my whole life, if I might say it now.
Please do.
Well, you know, there's a beautiful thought regarding Wednesday, June 7th, 1967. And as it happens, Wednesday, the 28th of ER 5777, May 24th, 2017, this year, that sages of Israel teach in a midrash that when the enemy destroyed the Holy Temple, it was actually at the conclusion of a Shabbat. It was on a Motzei Shabbat, both times actually, by the way. But regarding the Second Temple, there's a imagery that's very stark and very, very, moving and difficult. It describes how the Levites stood on the top of the altar and how they were attending to the service even as the flames of the temple were engulfing them, and they were being killed by the Roman legionnaires as they were serving Hashem. And it was a Saturday night. And they, everybody knows that when the offerings are being brought and the fire on the altar is being attended to, there's a daily song that's sung in the Holy Temple. And the statement of the sages is that the song that was sung at the time that the temple was being destroyed was the song that is recited on Wednesdays.
That's Psalm, the number offhand?
I don't remember the number of it, but it's Kel Nekamot Hashem, Kel Nekamot Hofia.
Right.
You could look it up, I'm sure, easily enough. In fact, I'll tell you right now as we're speaking. And the psalm begins with the words, O God of vengeance, shine forth." I'm going to just tell you right now which psalm it is. 1 second. Because I'm not online. It is indeed Psalm number 94. Psalm number 94 is God of vengeance, shine forth. It begins with those words. So that's what the Levites were singing. That was a song that was issuing from their lips as they were being killed, as the temple was being destroyed. And so, the way that this is always understood by most people, this teaching, is that the Levites were basically, they were beseeching God for him to manifest himself in his attribute of vengeance, to bring justice upon those that have desecrated his name. And they're basically calling for vengeance. Psalm 94, O God of vengeance, shine forth. But there's a very beautiful idea that was taught to me by one of my great rabbis that could only have been said in our generation, and it couldn't have been said for 2,000 years. And that is that's not what was going on. That's not what was going on at all. It wasn't that they were just simply, it's not so simple. It's not just that they were begging Hashem for vengeance for what was going on. It's that they were actually experiencing a prophetic revelation. They actually were having a tremendous epiphany and insight into the future, and that they saw that the next stage of the temple service will be on a Wednesday. The continuation of everything that they're sacrificing their lives for will also be on a Wednesday. And that's why they sang the song of Wednesday, because there was something very Wednesday-ish about that night. And indeed, Jerusalem, after almost 2,000 years, was reunited, and Hashem's name was sanctified on a Wednesday, June 7th, 1967, 28th of Iyar. And that's what they saw. They saw that the temple service is going to be continued on Wednesday, because truly the liberation and unification of Jerusalem in our time is the next stage in the beginning of the preparation for the rebuilding of the Holy Temple.
Very beautiful. Glad I thought of that. Behar and Bechukotei.
Yeah, you mentioned Leviticus, and you and I like that book. I think that we like it because
it's one of my 5 favorites.
Well, I know that every year Hashem gives us the tremendous merit, joy, privilege, blessing of trying to go deeper and deeper and understand what it's really all about. And I'm imagining that people who have trouble with Leviticus, and I know there are some, and I'm talking about Jewish people who feel that the temple is antiquated and that its service is irrelevant and that this just takes up a lot of space. I know that there's Jewish people who don't understand why we're still dealing with this book. I guess those kind of folks are really going to have a hard time with Parshat Bechukotai. Because if you're saying, you know, that we don't need the temple and everything, and we don't need no education, and what's this all about, and everything like that, I guess you really have a hard time with what is perceived by some people on a very superficial level to be a god, again, of vindictiveness, who just says, if you don't do things my way, it's my way or the highway, I'm going to zap you. That's how people look at Parshat Bechukotai, these admonitions. This is what's going to happen. This is the price you're going to have to pay if you don't keep the commandments. But that's not what this is all about at all, just as that's not what the book of Vayikra is all about. The book of Vayikra is about a person striving to be the best they can possibly be. That's the whole idea of the service of the Holy Temple, the whole idea of everything that Hashem gives us, all of the threads of light, the conduits of the advice that He gives us of how we can elevate our lives and imbue them with a higher sense of reality and being. That's what the mitzvot, the commandments, are all about. They're not about God. They're not about satisfying Him. They're not about placating Him. They're not about mollifying Him, and they're not about buying Him off. They're about becoming the best person that we can be, and it's all for us, for our benefit, for our benefit. That's what the service of the Holy Temple is all about. God could care less. It's about a person understanding the sanctity of life and getting the most out of the experience for the sake of his soul, which he's going to be returning to Hashem. So too, what Parshat Bechukotai is talking to us about is the natural state of what reality is. You know, we're talking about is Trump going to recognize Jerusalem? Isn't he going to recognize Jerusalem? Is he going to move the embassy? Isn't he going to move the embassy? You know what? It's all fake news. Everything is fake. Because the only reality is that there's a God in the world, and that the world was created for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is just to know that, and that is just to live according to that. So Parshat Bechukotai in Leviticus 26 and verse 3 begins with very succinct and very beautiful blessings. Mm-hmm. They're not verbose. Right. The admonition is very verbose. And by the way, I'll tell you the truth, everything all around us, to me, is exactly what this is all about. Mm-hmm. What's going on in this world today, this world of Chutzpah, this world of brazen, bald-faced lies and fake news and murder and mayhem and every sort of immorality and humanity gone totally haywire. That's what Parshat Bechukotai is all about, and that's basically where we're living now. Didn't I just use this line of what's his name, Barbosa from Pirates of the Caribbean? Didn't I just use this a week or two again? Oh, you don't believe in ghost stories, eh? You're in one, or something like that. Anyway, Parshat Bechukotai is so beautiful because basically Hashem says what the blessings are. And it's about having enough, knowing that you have enough, and dwelling securely and living in peace and not being frightened. I will provide peace in the land, and you will lie down with none to frighten you. Wow. Who ever heard of such a thing? Is it necessary for every city and village and hamlet in Israel to be fortified by armed guards at the entrance? Is it necessary for people to walk around with guns? Do you think we want to live like this? No, it's because of this terrible occupation for the past 50 years. And I refer, of course, to the occupation that the Arabs are occupying our land, and that we haven't dealt sufficiently with that. And so we're frightened, and so we have to live like we're not even sovereigns on our own land because of this ridiculous occupation, which is time to end. Time to tell the Arabs that we're not allowing them to occupy us anymore. So Hashem says, you will lie down with none to frighten you. I will cause wild beasts to withdraw from the land, and a sword will not cross your land. Could you ask for better than this? You will pursue your enemies, and they will fall before you by the sword. 5 of you will pursue 100, and 100 of you will pursue 10,000, and your enemies will fall before you by the sword. By the way, there's another beautiful thing that reminds me. I want to mention now, our Yom Yerushalayim, is that our own Rabbi Ariel, who of course was one of the soldiers who liberated the Temple Mount on that day, who was present in the battle for the Temple Mount and lost many, many comrades, and in fact was busy that day burying the bodies and parts of the bodies of 180 paratroopers who fell in the old city of Jerusalem. He says how he saw this verse come true before his very eyes, with the long lines of the Jordanian legionnaires with their hands on their heads. And in fact, there are photographs of this that we actually have on the Temple Institute website, these historical,
we'll be posting these
beautiful photographs of the 67 war, of how they'd be like one little Israeli soldier with an Uzi guarding over like a multitude of the Jordanian soldiers. And then the verse says, I will turn my attention to you, I will make you fruitful and increase you, and I will establish my covenant with you. You will eat very old grain and remove the old to make way for the new. I will place my sanctuary among you, and my spirit will not reject you. I will walk among you. I will be a God unto you, and you will be a people unto me. I am Hashem your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt from being their slaves. I broke the staves of your yoke, and I led you erect. So, you know, the first opening verse of Parshat Bechukotai reads, Im Bechukotai telechu, if you will go in my chukim, my ordinances, v'im v'yat mitzvotai tishmeru, and you will observe my mitzvot, v'asitem otam, and do them. And then the verse goes on, and then I'll give you your reign in his appointed time, etc., etc. So the famous question that many ask is, what does this mean, Im Bechukotai telechu, v'yat mitzvotai tishmeru? Because it's basically saying, if you go in my ordinances and keep my commandments. But what does that mean? If we're going in the ordinances, aren't we keeping the commandments? Isn't it the same thing? And as Rashi himself says, I would think if the verse says, Im bechukotai telechu, if you'll go in my ordinances, that means that you're keeping the mitzvot. So he explains this tradition that our sages teach, that v'et mitzvotai tishmoru, and you shall keep my mitzvot, is talking about the mitzvot. Yes, you should keep the commandments, but bechukotai telechu is referring to something else. It's referring to being occupied with the Torah, being occupied with Torah study. And as I hope we're going to be exploring this week in our video lesson, being occupied with Torah study doesn't just mean studying Torah, which is in itself very praiseworthy and very, very important. It means kind of like plugging in to Torah in every way and finding yourself there and endeavoring to see what it is that we need to do to fix ourselves and to fix the world. That's what it means to be occupied with the Torah. And so what this parsha is painting for us, the picture is that bringing about the state of bliss that the first verses describe, a state of perfect cosmic balance, and this perfect relationship that we have with the Creator, and the state of pristine serenity, that has to do with taking responsibility once again for ourselves, for who we are, for what we need to be doing in the world, and that we can only really understand through our obedience to and our immersion of ourselves in Torah. And if we don't, the results are disastrous for us, just as when we don't respect the land of Israel, we don't keep the sabbatical year, the land will spit us out, the land will reject us. Again, not only on the level of the Shemitah, which is in itself true, but for everything that it also represents as far as our connection to what this land is, our respect, our reverence for this land, our security, our state of being, our welfare is totally connected to who we are, how we behave, and how we live in this land. That's what this is all about. That's what Behar and Bechukotei is all about. It's such a fitting conclusion to the book of Vayikra, which is the manual of how we should really relate to Hashem's presence in this world. And yes, we're going to be continuing now to Parshat Bechukotai as we ready ourselves to receive the Torah at Mount Sinai, Shavuot. We're ready to go into the land, and the story just repeats itself every year. We go deeper and deeper, and we still. Don't worry, don't think that we're going to get it right. We still don't have it right. But you know what? Very impressed I was that the President Reuven said to David Friedman, it's high time that America recognized Jerusalem as the capital. It's all connected. This pride and this sense of belonging and conviction of who we are and what we deserve and who we're supposed to be, it's all one thing. You cannot divorce the political realm, even what you would call the secular political realm. You cannot divorce that from our connection to the Torah and Hashem and this land and each other. This is all one package of who we are, and it's all being reflected exactly in these Torah portions.
I'd like to add, Rabbi, to that, what you're saying, that it's also reflected in the somewhat curious conclusion to Bechukotai, the final chapters and verses of Vayikra, Leviticus, and that is after the conclusion of the long list of admonitions, which concludes on a positive note. Then Torah starts to talk about a person who takes a neder, a vow, and you ask, well, wow, like, this is almost like it's stuck in there, like a footnote, an addendum or something. Like, why is this here at the end of Vayikra? What's it doing here? It could have been anywhere. And I think it's reflecting on what you're saying now. It's emphasizing the personal responsibility that each of us has to uphold this connection and to walk in the Bechukotai, to walk in the what did you call them before in English? The ordinances, and to perform God's commandments. That we have to take ourselves seriously. Our word is serious. It's also, it goes into the whole thing of the fake news and then the chutzpah that people say what they want and they don't mean it and they throw their word around.
Look what we had here in this 1 week. Everything that I mentioned, I'm going to mention only a tip of the iceberg. We have an arch-terrorist murderer fiend elected mayor of Hebron, and he is a representative of the party of Abbas, whom Trump just met with, and told Trump that he's educating Palestinian children for peace, and they named their schools and streets after arch murderers and terrorists and teach their children to blow themselves up and kill Jews. A Jordanian attacks an Israeli policeman, and Jordan is angry at Israel for killing the terrorist, and then Jordan says, but we're always the voice of peace and reason. The Nakba, we're supposed to apologize for the Nakba. We're supposed to apologize that the state of Israel was created, right? We're supposed to apologize that we won.
They didn't kill us, yeah.
They're all fakes, right? I'm sorry, they didn't get to kill us all yet. They're all fakes. Is Trump a disappointment? Was it just a campaign promise to move the embassy? Is he going to? Isn't he going to? The nerve. Somebody said the Kotel isn't even ours. You know what? I don't care. You're all fake. You're all chutzpah yaska. You're all arrogant, bold-faced liars. And you're all fake news. And the
you know
only
what?
thing that you can believe is this week's Torah portion.
Yeah.
That you can believe.
And God says in the conclusion, basically, I gave you my word, now you stick by your word. And that is, my vow to you is that this land is a land of peace and security and complete joy and happiness if you follow my ways. And you know what? If you're going to make a statement and you're going to make a promise, then you have to stand by it too, just like I stand by my word. I think that's it in a nutshell.
So we're all wondering, is what's Trump going to announce when he's here? Is he going to announce the big deal? Is he going to announce a forced peace? Is he going to announce we have to give up something else? Is he going to announce that we have to commit suicide? Is he going to recognize Jerusalem? Isn't he going to? I don't know. I don't care. I'm not disappointed. Hashem recognizes Jerusalem. That's for sure.
Wow. Hashem recognizes Jerusalem, and we live here. And that's good enough for me. It doesn't get better. It doesn't get better than that.
It's going to get a little worse when Trump comes to visit. We're going to be sorely inconvenienced, and we're not going to have any parking places.
So many policemen in the middle of our celebrations. Oof. What's that all about? Why? Here's the music. It's been great, Rabbi. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Happy
Thank you all
Day.
for being with us. We'll be back next week as part of the Jerusalem Day week-long celebration. Thanks for being with us. Temple Talk.